Thanks for being here, especially after such a busy last couple of weeks with Turbo Channel 19 and all the things that are going on and are still going on. We still have our, facilitated after action this afternoon with the directors and a lot of the key staff. And so lots and lots been going on. So hopefully this is an opportunity for you to take a little bit of a breather and really get an opportunity to talk to some of the senior leaders. The whole idea of the TRANSCOM show is to enable the entire workforce to be able to be presented with issues, whether it's subjects like we'll be covering today, or whether it's through the tech talks that we talk about technology and the way forward with technology, but gives the audience a chance to have a dialogue with leadership. So I really appreciate you being here, as well as the folks that are out there on BCS. I want to take this opportunity to welcome Mr. Bruce Bussler. So Bruce, really appreciate you being here. Bruce and his team and many members of the enterprise have had quite the task over since the 2017 NDAA have come out, and we've asked Bruce to come explain that a little bit to us. This will be at the unclassified level. I just want to remind everybody this is at the unclass level. Bruce, please have a seat. Welcome. Glad to have you. So, as is usually the case, there's new faces in the audience. Bruce, so if you wouldn't mind just kind of introducing yourself, because some folks, most folks know who you are and appreciate you in a big way. But if you would just get an opportunity to explain kind of your background a little bit, or how you got where you are.
Yeah, I'm a retired Air Force officer. I flew large airplanes for a long time. Helped build the C-17 along the way. My engineering background, my undergraduate degree was in mechanical systems engineering, and helped critical design review through first flight of that airplane. So that's where my engineering background comes from. Then was in flight support with that as well. So I guess I could say I was born an engineer, but I love flying airplanes. But I really found out that I really thrived with using Maslow's hierarchy, self-actualized when you start thinking about large-scale systems and how they have to work together. So I am delighted to be the director of GDPAC, to work with some incredibly talented people in there. I've been the director since 2010, which is when the Analysis Center was fully formed at FOC, which is when we brought all the folks from SDC and then occupied 1900 West over there. And so we kind of rose up from the ashes, if you will. Why do I say that? Because we never had an analysis center before. We had some people up in the J5 doing mobility study work. We had a thing called the Transportation Engineering Agency, which was down at Newport News when SDC was up in other parts of Virginia. And then we had Air Mobility Command A9 that was now created into this big thing called an analysis center. And the synergy we gained by bringing all that talent together with engineers and analysts is really what makes us powerful. Not only for TRANSCOM, but really for the entire Department of Defense. The vision General Handy had when he created this idea of GDPAC was that our combatant command ought to have the expertise to be able to cover the entire technical framework, which is the infrastructure analysis we do, the case mobility study, the ops research analysis, and now the data science work we're doing to be able to break into predictive analysis, artificial intelligence, machine learning with our J6 partners as they look kind of build the enterprise data environment. Is really where we're continuing to advance the cause of the bill, to apply technical means to solving the department's really hard and complex distribution problems. So that's really the nature of what we do now in GDPAC. I'm incredibly proud and every day wake up thrilled to work with the great people we have.
No, I would agree. I think you're the envy of the other combatant commands, right? So because it's a very unique organization, so we're very fortunate to have you. So, thanks, Bruce. Okay. So let's get into the discussion topic. So, MCRS. Who conducted the MCRS? Totally. I know some people think, well, that was just a GDPAC adventure, but it wasn't.
It was not. So this is maybe it's one of the other questions I won't try to get ahead of you, but we've done, this is the 7th one we've done over the last 25 or 26 years or so. They're pretty important. You may have heard other studies. We had the MRS. Guru, going back quite a few years. Every one of them has been designed to help illuminate some aspect of our mobility enterprise that was important for the department to understand. So this study we did was co-led by TRANSCOM on behalf of the chairman and by our partners in OSD Cape, which is it used to be called P&E back in the day, but on behalf of the secretary, that's his ability to have a group of folks that do similar work that we do. Their depth is a lot thinner than ours, though. They've only got a handful of folks, rather than literally dozens of people do that work. And this one we did also in partnership with the Joint Staff J4, who represents the equities of the other combatant commands as we provide mobility out to school. So that's really the trifecta on behalf of the department. TRANSCOM with our analysis center, OSDK representing the equities of the secretary, and then Joint Staff J4 representing the combatant commands and their needs as we prosecute the mobility study.
So as you volunteered and stepped up and waved your hand and said, hey, send this up to me. How did the study come about? What was the catalyst?
So the studies have come about in different ways. This one was actually congressionally directed. The FY18 National Defense Authorization Act directed this study to be done, specifically to address the new defense strategy. Later on, we'll talk about some of the challenges with that. But the NDAA direction came out in December of 2017. The National Defense Strategy was rolled out until January 2018. So we're a little bit ahead of ourselves there, and that was one of the real challenges. We talk about the underlying demands, which I can talk about in that class a little more about why that created a real challenge for us. But the Congress basically has always had a keen interest in terms of, do we have enough of the right kinds of things to prosecute the needs of the Department of Defense? And so the mobility enterprise is one of the few areas that we've had a jointly vetted analysis study that probably is more studied than any other area in the department. The services aren't doing this uniquely. But the real, compelling aspect of this is the services by themselves will not probably have the same attention to mobility things we have to have for the joint force. Therefore, the Congress is very interested to see, are the services providing the right means, the right capacities to be able to provide the means of support for the joint force outcomes that the strategy is now requiring. And that was one of the key things that they wanted to hear from the study. We fell a little bit short in that respect, and I'll talk later on about what we're going to do later on. But that's why the Congress has been interested in the past. Some of the studies have been directed as part of defense planning guidance or have been initiated just in internal department. But the last several have been congressional directed as well. This was one of those.
So, and what were the findings of this particular study?
So this study, I'll be very careful because General Lyons is very careful about how he characterizes this. And it really has to do with what I called the underlying demands for the nature of the demands for this study were based upon contemporary operational plans, O plans. And many of you may recognize that O plans that we have today are configured for kind of a fight tonight condition, which means they're constrained by ready forces that are available right now and oftentimes fall short of the combatant commander's desires, but they are what we can currently provide for their immediate needs. So the Vice Chairman, General Sullivan, directed that we use O plans for this. That's the best we had. And the other alternative is what we call defense planning scenarios. And a lot of people are not familiar with those, but the department has a series of scenarios that really create the long-range, fully capable output we have to meet the broader needs of the Department of Defense. And those have not been adapted yet to really reflect the new national defense strategy. And so those were unable to, so we used the current O plans near term, and then have to adapt those to go out to the end of the fight at FY23 to use those as the basis of doing the study. So why do I make that an important point? The O plans, in many cases, have not evolved really, look about like the ones we had 5 years ago. We did the last mobility study. And so the mobility study concluded that the current capabilities and capacities we have are adequate to meet the needs of national defense strategy as represented by the current O plans, in some cases with elevated risk. And I can't go into elevated risk discussion here. We see if you watch General Lyons' testimony, especially with the HASC, they were very pointed about some areas where we had some risk, where we said the capacity is adequate or sufficient for elevated risk. And they said, well, General, don't we need to do something about mitigating elevated risk? And he said, yes, I do. And therefore, in one missionary, specifically air refueling, we've got more work to do to address that. So when we say it's sufficient, it's always in the context of elevated risk, but there's certain things we cannot do that now created this conundrum we have. So when he talks about this, it's only in that context of the current demands. So one of the things we're going to have to deal with is the Congress will probably ask us to come back and do more work in this area. Matter of fact, just last Friday, we received a draft of the FY20 NDAA proposed language that will require us to do a mobility study. Why is that the case? Because the Congress said you didn't quite answer the questions that we wanted to reflect against this national defense strategy. And the reason that's important is the slide that's on the screen right now shows the 5 NDS wartime missions. Those wartime missions, as we align the different O plans against them, consume capacity mobility enterprise at different rates. So notice the one that they're in the area fueling area, all 5 of the NDS wartime missions require air fueling output. So how you manage that, especially when you don't have enough capacity to go around, is where the elevator twist came from. And so the other thing that you notice up there is under great power competition, which is where most of our mobility output is providing support for that, especially as we go into wartime conditions. That has not been fully evolved to develop the integrated plans the department expects to have in the future. And so the Congress said, well, when you figure those out, come back and give us an answer that reflects the national defense strategy. And so that's where we'll have more to do there as well. The other box I'll call out in the lower left-hand slide there talks about what else is different for this mobility study. And the nature of great power competition, which is different than the previous national defense strategies, by the way. This is one of the really radically different things about how this strategy will close the enterprise, is the great powers, China and Russia specifically, can really disrupt the ability to operate. So the ability to integrate contested environments, do that with an analytic footprint, was really a challenge for us as well. And one of the areas we're going to continue to refine is oftentimes we talk about threat assessments as if there's a red capability and intent to be able to interdict your ability to operate. Well, you can't do that in isolation. You have to look at blue and green forces that would interact with those, would create some kind of residual effect that then would be observed with mobility output. The ability to capture all that in time and space was really quite complicated. And so we've got a lot more work to do with the intel community, with our partners in the services, with our mission assurance folks to really build that out. And to be able to have the means of applying contested environment effects, mobility operations, now we can describe what we really can and cannot do under those conditions. And so we did a series of readiness reviews for the chairman, and the chairman came back and said, I do not want to see another readiness review for any of our great powers, or any of our adversaries really, that is divorced from the ability to have contested environment impacts on how mobility operations would be conducted. So the chairman level on down, this has got great interest in the department. And as we continue to do this work, there's an expectation that TRANSCOM will be thought leaders in this area, so we've got a lot of work to do to fill this out. So this is another area that's different about this mobility study from past ones. And I'll just point out that's the nature of this NDS. If you've not read the NDS in that light, I invite you to go back and reread the NDS and look at the implications for our enterprise, what it really takes for us to answer some of these really hard questions. And that's why we're going to get a chance to come back and provide another product that will meet the needs of Congress and the departments to go forward.
Well, I think what also maybe complicated your ability to explain your effort was the Air Force had just come out with a study, and the Navy had come out with the Navy next. Or what we,
yeah, so SEALs the Nation Needs was the Navy product that they came out with. We worked with them to provide for a characterization of what our SWIFT fleet needs to look like in the future. And the good news is that in the last several years that we have really gained the attention of the Navy, and they're strong partners now working with us. The Navy will recognize that our SEAL fleet is getting quite old. The latest that fleet continues to be degraded, so we must recapitalize that. And so General Lyons was quite vocal in his testimony. By the way, if you haven't picked up here, a lot of the work we did in the mobility study and some of the very direct questions that our boss got directly came from the work that we did in this area here. So he leveraged that to a great extent. So, so as much as that point, there were some shortcomings here, there was also some really very profoundly solid observations that came out of this work as well. And one of them was, we must recapitalize our SEAL fleet to power project the Army primarily relevant in our future environment. So General Lyons was able to take that and turn it back to the Congress and the department and said, we must accelerate our ability to recapitalize this fleet. And one of the real impediments is that the primary means of doing that is to go out and acquire available vessels on the open market. The challenge would be almost every one of those is foreign built. And right now the Congress has prohibited us from buying in large quantities those vessels. So he said, I want to accelerate that. So now we've got the opportunity to work with the Navy and doing that. The other challenge with the SEAL recap part is you look at the cost of those vessels. In an open testimony, the boss used these terms, but the cost of building a brand new vessel about the size of an LMSR, our biggest roll-on vessel, is about $1.1 billion per vessel in a new yard. And a U.S. yard is a new build to Navy spec. The cost of going and acquiring an existing foreign vessel that's available in the open market that would suit our needs, it would be about 10 to 15 years old. It would be about $50 to $70 million, depending on any cost we have to put into upgrading the vessels. We brought it back into our fleet. So that's about a 25 or 26 million cost differential, which we've got to do some more work to be able to create the space that allow the Congress to give us the ability to acquire those vessels and still eventually provide for an industrial base issue for the new vessels there. So that was a big challenge for us with the Navy on that. The Air Force came up. They were also directed in the FY18 Authorization Act to provide for an unconstrained FY30 look at the force the Air Force would need if they didn't have the constraints that we had imposed upon us in the mobility study. So one of the constraints that we had was that the national strategy talks about rationalizing lower priority missions where they accept higher risk in certain those demand stacks up there. And the Air Force looked at that and said, we're going to develop a profile that's in the out years, using a different demand that we didn't use. And we're also going to have a different risk calculation, which allows us to cover all of those without having any scarcity capacity or having to be confronted with having to position air refueling assets at the time of war. And that caused them to come up with a very different number than ours. And the publicly identified there was about 14 more air refueling squadrons being put on work. So the Congress was very pointed in that question as well. Why do you have a difference? And there's a rational thought behind that, but they came back and said you're going to have to do better and help us understand how those two numbers played out. The good news is the methodology is very consistent. The challenge we're going to have is to help them understand why those numbers are different and what we have to do to then manage risk between them and where the Air Force really should be programming money to be able to allow that to play out to the benefit of the department. So that's why those were also challenges we played this study out to help the Congress and the department really grapple with. In this case here, the nature of risk and what risk means. So that's the other part, is risk is kind of a loaded term. I'll just invite you to, when you hear the word risk, you always have to ask the question, under what conditions are you describing risk? In our case, we describe risk to mobility enterprise. General Alliance said the risk needs to be characterized in the impact of that demands they're prosecuting a warfight. And I would even take that to the grander sense of then wants to live strategically the whole departments are managing multiple warfights potentially. So I just divide you. If you hear the word risk, you need to ask the question, under what terms are you defining risk? Because that was a challenge for us to be able to characterize and quantify risk that had meaning to the Congress and others as we try to describe the impact of scarce capacity, in this case, we're refueling.
Right, so really, I think that's very important for the audience to understand why that difference, and I appreciate you going into that, because I've heard that from the congressional members asking the difference, and then certainly you've had to explain it with your Cape brethren on the Hill, and I appreciate all the efforts there. So what's next for the MCRS? And I know you talked about that a little bit, but what can we expect next for the following?
So I think that the department would like to, I think, especially our counterparts in OSD would like to think that we're done at this point in time. I think Joint Alliance looked at this, and by the way, the Director of Cape also committed to the Congress. We would continue to provide the current updates as the department matured its ability to then describe the demands that reflect our strategy. And realize this national strategy is going to require the whole department to reframe how we think about warfighting. And so we've got some do-outs as the department continues to evolve the demands. And there's my partners here in the front row here in the Surgeon General's office. We did an assessment for a certain demand for air medical evacuation for patient movement. That doesn't reflect probably the most challenging demand that is still evolving on a different theater that what requires to continue to look at patient movement, for example, a very high priority mission for us. How we look at not only the airlift aircraft to do that, but the underlying, in this case here, the CCAT teams and the air medical evacuation teams have to support this movement. So we're going to have to package the underlying demand in a way that better represents the strategy for the department, and I think the Congress will let us off the hook. And secondly, we're going to have to continue to refine our ability to characterize contested environments, which are continuing to evolve. And by the way, if you've read even an open press, the nature of what Russia and China are going to be able to do, both in the kinetic environment and for us non-kinetic cyber, and how we characterize cyber. I just mentioned this. We attempted to do a cyber assessment, and it was building on something we did about 2 years called a cyber thin line analysis. It was very difficult to be able to characterize a cyber weapon delivered against our enterprise, and then try to define the impact that would have, in both the depth and the time that would last, and then characterize the impact on our output. So we've got more work to do to be able to describe the impact of adversary activity and how it's going to impact mobility operations. At the end of the day, if you can't characterize that, it's really difficult to get people to pay attention to the mitigation activities, especially if you have to put resources behind us. We've got more work to do in that space as well. So again, whether it's going to be through a congressional direction, or whether it's just as the department continues to evolve some of the demands, we will probably be required in the next several years to continue to come back and provide for a better understanding of the inherent capability and capacity, and how that meets the needs of our combatant commands that are counting on us to deliver, and also to characterize risk. Risk to both the ability to deliver in test environments and the risk for how we manage serious capacity to be able to meet the very high-end needs of this defense strategy. And so that's where we see a lot of work. So we haven't stopped. Internal to JDPAC and with our leadership partners and component commands here as well, we're continuing to refine and add to the depth of knowledge that we have to build out. And the two areas we're really working on, continue to work on, is area fueling. Again, I'll just bring this to your attention. Area fueling is the most stressed demand we're going to have, we'll continue to have, and it also challenges the ability to do global command and control. And as you talked about, Visual Alliance, I think, has got a very clear understanding, and it's got a great way of articulating what we have to have to be successful. We have to have networks and nodes to prosecute operations. We have to have mobility, capacity, capabilities to operate through those network nodes. Then we must integrate demand globally and then exercise command and control at the speed of war, or with the strategies at the speed of relevance, to employ those capabilities and capacities across those networks. So the mobility study fulfills that in spades. So as we articulate that, with the analytic rigor we're able to bring this, we will continue to provide that kind of output over the next several years, I think. So the team's not done yet. As much as Colonel Ersheimer, who is the study director, would like to think we're done, we've got a lot of work to do. And so I guess that's where I'd say that in the past, we kind of let these things go dormant for about 4 years or so. The last one was 5 years ago. This one, I think, is going to be an expectation of a more recurring update, and we'll provide regular updates. In the past, what I did for U.S. TRANSCOM is the intervening years, we would always do a mobility white paper to update what we thought was necessary for our commander to understand that. We will continue to provide that kind of output as we provide that support for our boss and to the department as they need to understand what they're doing. I think there'll be a greater expectation at the departmental level that we continue to do this work.
Well, then also, you'll periodically get from a curveball that may throw a wrench in things. For example, to your team, how's the KC-46 delay in delivery going to impact what you just told us?
So that was a question that General Lyons got in his testimony. The good news is the KC-46 is being delivered. The bad news is it's being delivered as a less than fully capable airplane. And so there's got some work the Air Force can have to do to manage that process as they start to train squadrons to do that transition work, and then work with Boeing to fix a couple of residual limits that airplane has. So the Air Force made some very wise decisions. We were able to do some analysis for General Lyons that said, based upon the Air Force's commitment to retain 28 airplanes, the active component, through FY23, that covers a lot of the transition challenges that we observed that the KC-46 would create as a shortcoming. That now allows us to have, at the commander level, all of the output we have to meet the NDS plans without being degraded because of that limitation. The real question is going to become is there a case to be made for post-FY23, which is the year that the Air Force expects to have the KC-46 remedied and have it to be declared fully operational. Is there a case to be made that we need more capacity in the years beyond that? And as we look at some of the evolving demands, that's really where the challenge we have, particularly what's the risk and how do we articulate what that profile would look like to say, is it worth the department's investment to be able to buy that risk down?
Well, I can't imagine this command not having this particular expertise, because without it, we wouldn't have been able to answer those questions in a timely fashion, just based on your team's expert knowledge and the systems that you have that are able to get after those kind of answers.